Well, he'll be 30. Yeah, and then I have great grandchildren. 6, 2. My husband and I have children, grandchildren, great. I thought that with that, daddy, like we don't kids. Jennifer, the J. And they're seeing with you, so they don't associate with mom and dad.
Are you expecting a full crew here? Or?
Nope, just me. Yeah, I took a walk the other day. Doesn't really right shoes. Yeah.
All right, good evening. It's good to have everyone out tonight. We're going to get started here with, we're going to sing one song, we'll have a message, and another song, and then we'll be dismissed to Bible class tonight. So we're going to start off with number 381. I bet you all have never heard this one. Not this week yet. 381.
Years I spent in vanity and pride, carrying up my Lord was crucified, knowing not it was for me he died on Calvary. Mercy there was great and grace was free, pardon there was multiplied to me, there my burdened soul found liberty at Calvary. By God's word at last my sin I learned, then I trembled at the law I spurned, till my guilty soul imploring turned to Calvary. Mercy there was great and grace was free, pardon there was multiplied to me, there my burdened soul found liberty at Calvary. Oh, the love that drew salvation's plan, oh, the grace that brought it down to man, oh, the mighty gulf that God did span at Calvary. Mercy there was great and grace was free, pardon there was multiplied to me, there my burdened soul found liberty at Calvary.
Okay, before I get started, am I on? I got a green light. I just talk real loud. How's that? Okay. All right. Before I get started, I think it's working, isn't it? No? How's that? Can you hear me now? Okay. If you remember, our oldest daughter, Mandy, and her husband, Kyle, and their boys, Ethan and Jack, went on a mission trip in the spring, and they went to Mexico and built a homeless single mother a house. They call it a house. It's a really small house. But they do it in like 3 or 4 days. And Ethan enjoyed it so much that he wanted to go back and do it again. And being the granddad that I am, I didn't want him to go by himself, even though he would be with the group. So I told him I'd go with him. They were short-handed, and so I told him I'd go with him. We're going with a group, Casa por Cristo, which is Houses for Christ, and they build like 70 of these a year. And so we'll be going up to Mandy's here next week, and we'll, I think the 8th through the 12th, me and Ethan will be in Acuna, Mexico, building a house for an elderly couple that actually has their grandchildren, and they're raising them, and they, of course, are homeless. They don't have a house either. So I'd ask for your prayers that everything goes okay. Today's world, you want to be careful. Your prayers are much be appreciated. The other thing I'd like to talk to you about is Denise and I have been wandering in the wilderness for 51 years, and we decided that it's time for us to go home. Not our heavenly home, at least not right away anyway, but I'm ready for that too. We're going to move to Alabama. Probably around the first of the year, we're going to put our house up for sale. We've already got some people that are interested in it, and we bought a lot over there. We'll be living about a half mile where Denise was raised. The subdivision that we're in over there was actually a cotton field when she grew up there. So I guess you could say we're going back to those old cotton fields back home. So, but anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. And, something that we thought about for a long time and that we prayed really hard about. And don't worry, we'll be back plenty because we'll still have Megan and Gary and the girls here. So, but it's something that was always our goal to go back home. So that's what we plan to do. I've read both of these before here, but the way things are in society today, I think it'd be appropriate to read it again. It wasn't that long ago. After I read it, I'd like to ask you, when do you think this was written? And it's, if I were the devil. If I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness. And I'd have 1/3 of the real estate and 4/5 of the population, but I wouldn't be happy until I'd seized the ripest apple on the tree. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers with the wisdom of a serpent. I would whisper to you as whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I could confide that what is bad is good and what good is square. In the old, I would teach to pray after me, our Father which are in Washington. Then I'd get organized. I'd educate the authors of how to make literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war against themselves, churches at war with themselves, nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And the promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. Imagine that. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects to neglect the discipline of emotions. Just let those run wild, and before you know it, you'd have drug-sniffing dogs, metal detectors in every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I would evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, then from the houses of Congress, and then his own churches. I would substitute psychology for religion and defy science. I would lure priests and pastors to misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I would make symbols of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted it, until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what do you bet? I couldn't get the whole states to promote gambling as a way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work and patriotism and moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, what you see on TV is a way to live, and thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases which there is no other cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep on doing what he's doing. Any idea when that was written? What year? This was written by Paul Harvey. I'm a Paul Harvey fan. I loved him. It was written in 1965. But how, we could relate to that to today. I mean, the way things are. I don't know about you, but I'm ready for this election to be over with. It makes me sad to see what our country has become and the bickering back and forth. And, we just need to pray for a nation under God. And another thing to go along with this is, and I think I've read this here several times too, with all that going on, the one thing that we have control of is our attitude. And I've read this before. I think I mentioned when I was working before I retired. It was in my cubicle at work, and it talks about our attitude. The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than facts. It is more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successes, than what other people think or say or do. It is more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, a home. The remarkable thing is we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace for that day. We cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people will act in a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one string that we have, and that is our attitude. I'm convinced that life is 10% of what happens to us and 90% of how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes. No matter what's going on in the world today, God's in control, and it's our duty to be in control of our attitudes and have the right attitude about it. So hopefully you'll get something out of that. Like I said, it is sad that our country has come to what it is today. I was looking at some of the stuff that we have on the shelf in our house, and there's an old Kodak camera that was Denise's mom's. The one that takes the roll-up film, and you have to crank it and take a picture and then send it off. And I almost wish that we were back to those days instead of these. But we can't turn the clock back. You know, there's some good things that have happened with technology, but we need to be careful of the attitude that we have and not let the world drag us down into the mud and murk and mire that a lot of the world is in right now. So if you have a need or need some prayers, Thomas has got one more song for us. Please come forward and we'll pray with you.
And press the battle ere the night shall veil the glowing skies. Against the flowing billows below, and all our strength be hurled. Faith is the victory we know, that overcomes the world. Faith is the victory, faith is the victory. Oh, glorious victory that overcomes the world. To him that overcomes the foe, by train it shall be given. Before the angels we shall know his name confessed in heaven. Then onward from the hills of light, our hearts with love aflame, will vanquish all the hosts of night, in Jesus' conquering name. Faith is the victory, faith is the victory, oh, glorious victory that overcomes the world.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for this week we've had so far. Thank you for the beautiful fall weather we're starting to get into. Lord, just thank you so much for your son that died on the cross for our sins. Thank you for this church and this body that meets here. Thank you for all the preachers and elders and deacons that work so hard for this church. Go with us the rest of the week. Bring us back on Sunday. Help us have a good week. In Jesus' name, amen.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing.
Jake. 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 Can you get this up there? This up there. All right, let's get started. I want to finish chapter 8 tonight. We probably won't, I'll be honest with you. So if we happen to make chapter 7 and 8 a 4-week ordeal, then we just will. That's just how it's going to be. But we'll try. There's a lot that happens. We want to hit on a lot of different things. So what we're doing is now we're about to move into the Battle of Ai 2. Battle of Ai 1 did not go well. It certainly did not go well for Achan. I had a question about Achan last week. I want to start with a question after class. And you remember, what all did Achan take? He took a cloak of Shinar. Shinar was a land up around where they built the Tower of Babel. It had been there for thousands of years now at this point. And it's mentioned in Genesis, all throughout the Old Testament, this area of Shinar. And the Tower of Babel and then Babylon all are in that area, just to give a little context around that. So he took a robe. What was he going to do with the robe? He couldn't wear it. Everybody would know where he got it from. So I would expect, probably planning to sell it or something. He took 200 shekels of silver and a gold bar weighing 50 shekels. Okay? So the question I was asked is, how did he carry all that? So my first thought was, well, maybe this is how his whole family got involved in this, and they were just as guilty. Maybe they're helping him carry these things, and he may have had sons of age who were also fighting in Jericho. But then, when you start kind of researching and finding out how much a shekel is, now a shekel is a unit of weight, and it's also a monetary unit. So there's two different things happening there. If for example, if you had 50 silver shekels, that equals 6 gold shekels. So it's kind of like 4 quarters in a dollar, right? Same thing. That's the value. But as far as the weight of a shekel, the weight of a shekel is about half an ounce. So if he had 200 silver shekels, they weighed half an ounce each. That makes 100 ounces. That makes a little over 6 pounds. Okay? And then he had his gold bar, which was 50 shekels, which would be 25 ounces, which is 1.5 pounds. Weighs a little bit, about a bottle of water and a half. And he could probably fit those 200 shekels of silver in that gold bar, maybe in some kind of pouch. So carrying 7 pounds in a pouch, plus a robe that was probably rolled up and tucked away somewhere. He actually could carry all that out by himself. He did not need help. It sounds like a lot of stuff, but it wasn't that much. And that tells you even more about where his heart was, is this wasn't like overwhelming riches that he was taking. It was something, but he had flocks and herds and a tent. He was probably not a poor man anyway. And so it really sheds some light on how little he died for and how little 36 other people died for, and the shame and embarrassment that came on the entire nation of Israel, how little was really put out for all that to happen. Anyway, so that's what I found about that question. And, Old Testament measurements and weights could be different. If you found something that says something different, then I say that we could probably both be right. So let's move on, and we're going to start in chapter 8. And when we talked about those Bible themes that show up in these two chapters, the main theme you're going to see tonight is this idea of God turning a defeat into a victory and actually using our talking about humanity's poor decisions to actually help in the victory. And that's going to be evident as we go through this. So let's jump into Joshua. We'll start in Joshua 8, reading verse 1 and 2. The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not fear, do not be dismayed. Take all the fighting men with you and arise, go to Ai. See, I have given into your hand the king of Ai and his people, the city and its land. You shall do to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho and its king, only its spoil and its livestock you shall take as plunder for yourselves. Lay an ambush against the city behind it." So, several things that are jumping out at you so far. First of all, he says, "Do not fear, do not be dismayed." That means we've taken care of Achan, we've taken care of the sin, head up, now we're ready to move forward, right? We're not going to continue to dwell on this. Everything that needs to be taken care of has been taken care of, and we as a group, as a nation, are ready to move forward. That's a great lesson to, once sin has been removed from our lives, we can move forward. We can move forward. We can move on. Do not fear, do not be dismayed. Going back to the relationship he had as they went into the land. How many times was it? 3 times in chapter 1, he said, "Do not fear," right? God is now with them. Next thing I want to look at is this. "See, I have given into your hand the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land." When you go back to chapter 6 and we're planning on going into Jericho, you read this, "And the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hand with its king and its mighty men of valor." What does that tell us about the second battle of Ai? What was lacking in the first battle of Ai? Yeah. Now, right. Now God is going with them. God is giving them the battle plan. He's given them the command. What was lacking the most from the first attack on Ai was God. And now we know God is here. He uses the exact same language, and this goes back to the same language God used all throughout the Exodus when he said that they're going to go into the promised land, which I have given you. He always talked about it in that tense. This is already done. It's already done because I'm doing it, and I'm doing it with you. Remember, this is God's battle, and these guys are just doing the fighting, and Joshua, obviously, the leading. Couple other things that are going to jump out. So that's the first thing for me, is that now Ai is just like Jericho, right? The battle is going to be fought, and the battle is all but won. A couple other things we're going to see. The first battle of Ai, they took about 2,000 or 3,000 based on the report of the spies. They sent about 3,000 up, and they lost. This time, God says, take all. Do you remember how many fighting men there were? If you go all the way back to that Deuteronomy census that they took, there was 600,000. They're going up with a force this time, okay? 1,200, I think, is all that we're going to encounter in Ai. After everybody's dead, it comes out to like 1,200. They're taking 600,000. That's what all means to me. Take all the fighting men. And that's all those from those tribes from the east of the Jordan. That's all those within the tribes that are going to stay west of the Jordan. And now we're taking everybody according to God. In verse 2, he says, "You shall do to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho and its king." Total annihilation. That is now the battle plan. We're going to wipe them out, just like we did to Jericho. And now the difference here is Jericho, you remember, there were those things that were set apart for God, the things that were dedicated to God. Here, it's wide open. You can take all the plunder you want. Why do you think, and again, we don't know the mind of God. I've got an idea that I came up with, but why do you think Jericho, everything was dedicated to God or destruction? The valuable things, the gold, the silver, the bronze, and the iron, went to the treasury of God. But now, you guys can grab some stuff. Is your Bible reading to you over there? Leonard, did you have an answer for that? There you go. Can you say something? Yeah. God gets the first fruits, right? So the first city we take out, we're going to dedicate that to God. All the plunder, all the things that we get, all those things received, it is giving back to God, answering the blessing that he gave them, right? The leadership, the plan, fulfilling the promise, all those things. And now, you guys get to take what you want. Take it home. Get you a robe from Shinar. Get you some silver. Get you some gold. All these different things, whatever you see, you can take the plunder. So that's one of the differences there as well. And then it ends here with him telling them to lay an ambush against the city behind it. Let's read a little more. I'm going to jump to a couple maps, and we're going to kind of summarize a few things, but let's read a little more. There's a lot here. Bear with me. I think it's valuable that we do read this, unless you guys already read it. See, no hands. All right. Joshua and all the fighting men, again, all the fighting men, arose to go up to Ai. Joshua chose 30,000 mighty men of valor, sent them out by night. He commanded them, behold, you shall lie in ambush against the city behind it. Do not go very far from the city, but all of you remain ready. And I and all the people who are with me will approach the city, and they'll come out against us just as before. Tuck that away. We shall flee before them, and they will come out from us. We have drawn them until we have drawn them away from the city. For they will say, they're fleeing from us, just as before. So we will flee before them. Then you shall rise up from the ambush, seize the city. The Lord your God will give it into your hand. And as soon as you have taken the city, you shall set the city on fire. You shall do according to the word of the Lord. See, I have commanded you according to the word of the Lord. You remember that as one of those Bible themes. Here is different, right? The first battle of Ai, there was no according to the word of the Lord. Now we're doing what God said. Verse 9, Joshua sent them out. They went to the place of ambush, lay between Bethel and Ai, to the west of Ai, but Joshua spent the night among the people. So what's our battle plan? Number one, all the fighting men are going. Number two, 30,000 are chosen as an ambush. They're going to lie in wait behind Ai on the other side of the city. Joshua and the army are going to approach. They're going to be in an attack posture. When the Ai army comes out, Israel is going to retreat. All right? And they're going to suck them right into it, okay? Ai will follow, leaving the city empty and vulnerable, and then the ambush force moves into the city. Let's pause on this real quick. And I got a better graphic of the actual battle coming up. It's cool. Jericho, Ai, Bethel. Bethel is going to come into play. It's going to be mentioned, and it was mentioned here between Bethel and Ai, so that ambush force is going to be on that west side, left side, looking at the map. And then Joshua's going to come in more from the north or northeast side of the city, and we're going to see that there's going to be a valley there. One thing I want to pause on, though, as we look at this and we understand the battle plan. Let's go back to verses 5 and 6. I want to highlight something real quick. So we leave them. The 30,000, they're going to go to their ambush place. Joshua and the rest are moving toward Ai. They're going to camp along the way. Now, you remember the great error in the chapter before was that Joshua moved on the city without authorization or support or a plan from God. And it ended by God's people being embarrassed, being shamed into retreat, and they turned their backs on their enemies. God does not retreat, and yet here his people are running away from Ai. So here, when God presents this plan, what he does, what you notice, is he actually uses the failure. He uses the failure as one of the elements that's going to lead to victory. So you remember that retreat, right? They ran up. As they're leaving, 36 people get killed. They lose people. They retreat all the way back to the camp. Everything's in shambles. Well, now God says, here's part of the plan. I want you to go up and retreat. Because when you retreat, remember that phrase? Just as before. They're going to think that Israel came back, they got all ready for battle, and they're just going to run away again. And so the Ai folks, where they chased them away and killed 36 this time, well, in their minds, we're going to chase them away and we're just going to take them all down. These guys are cowards. All this stuff that we heard about Jericho and crossing over the Jordan and spending all that time out in the wilderness, they're cowards. And so God uses that failure to set up and actually puts it in the plan. If Ai 1 doesn't happen, then this doesn't become part of the Ai 2 plan. And so you can think about this, understanding that God can use our most shameful, embarrassing failures, most sinful moments in life, and turn those into a victory. And you can think on that for a minute. If you can think of another example, you have a personal example you do or do not want to share, that's fine. Bible examples. I thought first of Joseph. How many times did it look like terrible things are happening? They lied to the dad, said he was dead. They threw him in a pit. From the pit, they intended to kill him. Reuben speaks up. He saves his life. They sell him into slavery. Shows up, and then he ends up in prison. And all that happened to put him where he needed to be to save his family. And he saved his family, and that family turns into this nation that is now going into a promised land, fulfilling a promise that's over 400 years old. God used all of those things that looked like failure. He looked like the worst thing that could happen to him, where he probably thought his life was over multiple times. And God turned every bit of it around, and it was all part of the story. It was all part of the plan. And so here, this retreat, this shameful moment for these Israelites becomes part of the plan. I think about Peter when he denied Christ. And you remember in John chapter 21, after Peter denies Christ 3 times, Jesus asked him 3 times, Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? And then he goes on to preach the first gospel sermon. He goes on to not only be an apostle, but an elder of the church. And so God took that defeat. He took that, and you know Peter felt it. You remember when the rooster crowed, he goes out and he weeps. You know he was embarrassed. You know he was ashamed. And God turns those things around. I think about the woman caught in adultery. I don't know what kind of life she lived. That had to be the low point, or at least one of them. And Jesus saves her life and sends her away. Daughter, sin no more. Kind of turns that into a victory. So the idea there, and if you have one to share, if you think of something, whether biblical or personal, that's fine. Just stop me. But the idea that you see here is that God took this terrible, terrible thing that happened, and he actually used parts of it to lead to his own victory. And I think that's just a really awesome thing when you look at that. And it's just amazing what God can do with the lowest points of our life. All right, let's move on. That was a good little aside there. Let's see. So part of the plan, God, you remember that when you retreated? We're going to use that. And it becomes part of the plan where they are now going to retreat to draw those men. And again, if that doesn't happen the first time, then it doesn't work the second time. It's just really cool. So pick up in verse 10. Joshua arose early in the morning. He mustered the people. He went up, he and the elders of Israel, before the people to Ai. All the fighting men who were with him went up and drew near before the city and encamped on the north side of Ai with a ravine between them and Ai. Now that's important too, because you remember the way they attacked last time, the way it's described, it's almost like they just went in. And if they're walking up from a ravine toward that city, toward a gate, obviously they are putting themselves in the worst position to fight someone. There's a reason fighting an uphill battle is an expression. It's not easy to fight an uphill battle. So they're there and they're before a ravine. The ravine is between them, so sort of a valley between them and the city. And they camp. Obviously, the king and the others in Ai are going to see this. Verse 12, he took about 5,000 men and he set them in ambush between Bethel and Ai. Now, he's already sent 30,000. And they're back behind there waiting for an ambush. Now he takes 5,000 more. And I got a graphic showing that'll kind of show some of this and help paint the picture here in just a minute. And they go between Bethel and Ai as well to the west of the city. So they stationed the forces, the main encampment that was to the north of the city and its rear guard west of the city. But Joshua spent the night in the valley. And as soon as the king of Ai saw this, he and all of his people, the men of the city, hurried, went out early to the appointed place toward Arabah to meet Israel in battle. But he did not know there was an ambush, which is why they call it an ambush, against him behind the city. All right? So just like God said, he sees them. He sees another opportunity. He's going to run them off just like he did before. They're going to retreat, those cowards. And in verse 15, it says, Joshua and all the people pretended to be beaten before them. They fled in the direction of the wilderness. So all the people who were in the city called together to pursue them as they pursued Joshua they were drawn away from the city. Not a man was left in Ai or Bethel. Now, this, when it mentions Bethel here, that's important because Bethel was a larger city, and Ai is thought to have been an outpost of Bethel. And so what would happen if this army is gathering outside of Ai? The men of Bethel, the army of Bethel, is going to come to Ai to support them. And so what you're finding is that Ai has been kind of built up, ready for battle, being kind of this outpost that's near. It was a smaller city, Bethel being the larger city. But now we know that no one was left. So the men from Bethel have now gone with the men from Ai for this battle. They left the city open and pursued Israel. So as they're leaving, we see that they certainly are going to run out, and they're going to chase them just like God said. Then Lord said to Joshua, stretch out the javelin that is in your hand toward Ai. I will give it into your hand. Joshua stretched out his javelin that was in his hand toward the city. The men in the ambush, so this was the signal, right? They rose quickly out of their place, and as soon as he stretched it out, they ran and entered the city and captured it. They hurried to set the city on fire. When the men of Ai looked back, behold, the smoke of the city went up to heaven. They had no power to flee this way or that, for the people who fled, that was Joshua and his part of the army, turned back against the pursuers. When Joshua and all of Israel saw the ambush had captured the city and the smoke of the city went up, they turned back and struck down the men of Ai. All right, so here's a pretty good idea of what's going on. So this is numbered, so let's follow the numbers. All right, so following the numbers, you see number 1 right there in the middle. That's Joshua and his army. Ai is a little white thing down by white city down by 6, and you can see Bethel over this way. They're gathered where they're supposed to gather. Number 2 to the left over here, that is your 30,000 men set in ambush, laying in wait, okay? And then we see our number 3. Joshua is moving, and he's going to go toward Ai. Number 4, they make a U-turn, and they start their retreat. And you can follow that, number 4, that arrow going all the way back, and see how far they're retreating. I mean, this is not to scale. But they're heading out. It looks like they're running for their lives just like they have before. Number 5, we see the men of Ai, including those coming from Bethel, are now chasing. As they chase, what we find is that the ambush force sees that the city is wide open and unprotected. They go in, take the city, they burn the city begins to catch on fire. Okay? Joshua sees this and he raises his javelin. The cool thing about the javelin, by the way, it makes me think back to Moses when they were fighting, and when Moses would hold up his staff, they would win. But when the staff was down, they would begin to lose. Well, here, when the javelin goes up, the retreat turns into an advance. So it kind of makes you think about Moses, and Joshua certainly was there as part of that army that fought in that battle. So it kind of made me think about that, kind of an interesting part of that. So that's your, let's see, where are we at? Let's see, 5, they come out. 6, they have captured the city. Now 7, you see that the Ai people are going to start heading back. They're being pursued by Joshua, and then they run into the ambush force. After they finish off the city, they move out to meet the army from Ai as well. Now, the other 5,000 that were also sent to the west side, that's number 8 up there. Best I could tell, and this is kind of again, this is just somebody taking what they read and putting it on paper. I think this is decent. That 5,000 for me is more like they're going to be between Bethel and Ai so that no one from Bethel comes to join this battle. Whether they knew or not that all the men from Bethel had already joined the battle, they're back there kind of as that, like they were called, the rear guard. So that's what they're doing. So at this point, the people from Ai, the army from Ai, is caught. They got people all around them, and that's what we read as we continue, is that they're surrounded. There are people all around them. They look back, the city's on fire. They got an army in front, they got an army behind, and this is how the battle plays out. So any questions, comments? That's a decent graphic on that. I think it explains it pretty well. Let me see. Oh yeah, I got a summary of the next part. I didn't, verses 22 through 23, it says Israel struck them down until there was no one left. And so at this point, there was no one left. It said, but the king was taken alive. And what we find out, what's done with the king, is after the city is burned, the king is hanged from a tree. He's left to hang until sunset. He hung there all day. And if you look at that, you can compare that to the law, which said if someone is hung from a tree, they're to be taken down by sunset. So Joshua, following the law of Moses there, he takes him down. He is laid at the gate of the city and covered with stones. Now that takes your mind back to what just happened to Achan. These cairns, these stone monuments that are left. Yes, it was a burial, but it was also a monument of reminder. When you come upon this pile of rubble and this big stone mound at the front, that is a reminder of what happened in that place. That is the king that's buried there. This city fell to God's army. And so that's kind of how the rest of that sort of wraps up. So a couple more things about that. Again, this was as the Lord said, right? Everything was done as the Lord said. They followed a plan that God gave them, and part of that plan actually used their failure to turn it into success. And so that was kind of how AI 2 is going to play out. Any questions or comments on that? It's pretty neat. I like it. Anyway, let's jump down to Joshua 8 and verse 30. All right, verse 30. Because as we get down here, we're going to read about it. It would seem, the way it reads, it's hard to see time here, right? This is going to be something that happened probably days later, and I'll show you why in just a second. At that time, so the battle's over, Ai has been taken, Bethel has also been taken, and in a couple of those verses we summarized and skipped, it does mention that all the men from Bethel and Ai were included in this battle. But picking up in verse 30, it says, "At that time Joshua built an altar to the Lord, the God of Israel, on Mount Ebal, just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the people of Israel, as is written in the book of the law of Moses." A couple things right there. First of all, this is telling us that the law of Moses was that Ptccoc. It's what we still call the law of Moses. Would probably specifically be, what's written in the law in Exodus and also in Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. Called here the law of Moses. And now that name, goes on for the rest of time. That is the law of Moses, what Moses wrote. He's referring back to Deuteronomy chapter 27. In Deuteronomy 27, Moses gives them instruction after they go into the land to go up to Mount Ebal, build an altar. That altar, what's quoted here, is to be made of uncut stones upon which no man has wielded an iron tool. So it's not to go chisel these out of a mountain or any type of quarry, but to collect stones that are around. Build an altar there. And part of that, Moses said to cover it in plaster, and on that plaster to write the words of the law. And that is what Joshua did. It says, upon which no man has wielded a tool, and they offered on it burnt offerings to the Lord and sacrificed peace offerings. And there, in the presence of the people of Israel, he wrote on the stones a copy of the law of Moses, which was written. So back in Deuteronomy again, it mentions covering it in plaster, giving you a smooth surface to write on. I think if you read it from here without that knowledge from Deuteronomy, you wonder how he wrote the law on all these stones that are just kind of piled up together. But he did this. Now, how long would it take Joshua to write the law? I don't know. It depends on how fast he can write. So obviously, this is not something that happened in one day. When we read this, when I've read it in the past, I read it as if they finished Ai and they went straight to this mountain and he wrote the law. They all stood there, as we're going to see in a minute, as he read the entire law. Boy, what a long day. That's a long day. If the law included all 5 books of the Pentateuch, that's going to be about 15 hours to just stand and read that. Okay? I don't know, and we'll jump ahead and see that. I don't know that they stood for 15 hours. This may have been a week-long event. They did sacrifices on this altar to God, and so obviously that's going to take time. Writing the law itself is going to take a lot of time. And what we find here is the people are going to do, again, just like Moses described back in Deuteronomy, half the tribes are going to stand on Ebal, half the tribes are going to stand on Gerizim. And on those mountains, near the bottom, the bases of those mountains are about 500 yards apart. It makes sort of a natural amphitheater. Now, I don't know if everyone could hear Joshua or how his voice was obviously didn't have a microphone, but however it was amplified, and either way, however that happened, it happened. But he stood there and they read the law, people all around in that area of the mountain on Ebal and Gerizim. And just picking up here in 33, it says, all of Israel, the sojourners as well as the native born, with the elders, officers, the judges, stood opposite sides of the ark before the Levitical priests. So they were down there in the middle of that valley, who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord, half of them in front of Gerizim, half of them in front of Mount Ebal, just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded at the first, to bless the people of Israel. In verse 34, afterward he read all the words of the law, the blessings and the curse, according to all that is written in the book of the law. There was not a word of all that Moses commanded that Joshua did not read before the assembly of Israel, and the women and the little ones, the sojourners that lived among them. So, again, Joshua is standing over a period of time, whatever it took. Again, I don't think they stood for 15 hours for this to happen. Now, another thing to consider, let's go here. All right, another thing to consider. It's hard to see, but now there's the red line. The red line represents 20 miles from Bethel up to the mountains of Ebal and Gerizim is between 15 and 20 miles, okay? So after that battle, did they walk 20 miles, the entire nation, to these two mountains, and this all happened? It's just not possible. So this happened at a later time following the Battle of Ai and the destruction of Bethel. Now, something important about this, though, is you can follow, if you start down, let's say there's Bethlehem, if off of the map, just down south of that is Beersheba. That dotted line is a road that goes all the way to Egypt. This is a road. This is a main road. It would be called a highway or a trade route, and it runs all along that ridge. You see through Bethlehem, through Jerusalem. It goes all the way through Bethel that they just destroyed, and up near Gerizim and Ebal was Shechem, another city. So what they did here, when you see as they come in from Jericho and they go to Ai and Bethel, what they did is they took a main road, and now they own that road. You can't go north, you can't go south without running in to the 600,000 strong army of Israel. So you can see the strategic importance of how they came into the land and taking Ai and Bethel. Again, there's 20 miles or 15 to 20 miles to go up to those two mountains. We don't read that they encountered any resistance on the way. And so we see that they make it and they fulfill exactly what Moses asked them to do, commanded them to do back in Deuteronomy as something that they're going to do when they get into the land. It was in the 80s. I don't know if it was like 1980 itself or the early 80s. This is a pile of stones that are unhewn. They have not been chiseled out of anything, according to the archaeologists that found it. This is on Mount Ebal, and there were animal remains buried around it as well. And those archaeologists think that to be the altar that was built and where those sacrifices were made. It was huge. If you look at this, and a lot could be sacrificed, but you're representing, 1,000,000-something people. And so it would make sense for it to be a very large altar and a very large structure built for the Lord. So that's something that's still there and is pretty interesting to me, maybe to you as well. So that takes us to the end of chapter 8 and 5 minutes late, which is what we usually do. So thank you for your attention. Y'all have a great rest of your week, and thanks for being here tonight. See ya.